Hi friends, E.C. Maltbia here, Senior Pastor of the True Holiness Saints Center in the beautiful city of Conway, Arkansas. And you know what time it is. It is Wednesday Word time. So what is our Wednesday Word for tonight? Our Wednesday Word is simply Christ above culture. Christ above culture. See, the culture says, don't let any person, place, or thing disturb your peace. Here's the culture's mindset. If it disturbs my peace, it's not allowed in my life. But here's the problem. What do you do when God wants to disturb your peace? You've got to make a decision, dear hearts. Am I going to have Christ first or the culture first? Again, I say to you, Christ above the culture. So why in the world, Pastor Maltbia, would God want to disturb my peace? And that's really what I want to talk to you about. I want to give you 3 reasons, 3 times in your life when God wants to disturb your peace. The first reason God wants to disturb your peace is when your peace is also your comfort zone. Yeah. When your peace is your comfort zone. See, oftentimes our God will disturb our peace in order to stretch our faith and to push us beyond our current limitations. Sometimes God disturbs your peace because he's trying to push you beyond your self-imposed boundaries and borders in life. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary for God to disturb your peace, to push you to the place he really wants you to be. Here's what I know about God pushing us beyond our comfort zones. When God pushes us beyond our comfort zones and he stretches our faith, that can be a scary experience. When God is asking you to step outside your comfort zone and take a risk, it can raise the level of anxiety in your life. This is why the Apostle Paul tells us in 2 Timothy 1:7, the King James Version. The Apostle Paul says, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but you know he's given us power, love, and a sound mind." See, when we have a heightened level of anxiety, when the nervousness begins to build because we're trying to take a calculated risk, we cannot allow our fear to paralyze us. In fact, let me give you our social media quote for today. God will disturb your peace to push you outside of your comfort zone. So you've got to decide this very moment, am I really going to follow Christ or am I following the culture? Because the culture says, don't allow anything in your life to disturb your peace. But God says sometimes he has to disturb your peace to push you out of your comfort zone. But then secondly tonight, God will disturb your peace when your peace involves bad behavior. You can count on that. Whenever what makes you peaceful is addictive, sinful, or part of bad behavior, you know God's going to break that up. Hebrews 12:1 says it best. Since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, listen to this next part. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. See, our God will always disturb our peace whenever our peace involves us indulging in sinful behavior. And maybe you're sitting there thinking, I don't get it, Pastor Maltbia. What does sinful behavior have to do with my peace? Think about it like this. Some people use sinful behavior as a way of self-medicating to help them deal with painful events in their life, to help them deal with traumatic experiences, to help them deal with grief. Let me give you a good example of what I'm talking about. Sometimes some people will reach for alcohol or drugs to try to self-medicate when their anxiety is building, when their stress gets too hard, when they're trying to forget a painful memory. What do? They say, I need a drink to calm my nerves. I need to take a blunt to settle myself. And whenever you're using destructive, sinful activities as your peace, Jesus says no. Here's another example of what I'm talking about. Every now and then, a young lady will have sexual intercourse outside of marriage, one-night stands and sneaky links and all of these other things, being the chick on the side, because they're looking for self-medication, because they want to feel loved, they want to feel needed, they want to feel desired. But whether you're talking about drugs and alcohol or sex outside of marriage, they are only temporary solutions. Because once you come off the high, your problem is still there. And once that person leaves your bed, the feeling of loneliness is still there. And sometimes it's compounded by what you've just done. So you've got to understand, to avoid you having future hurt and going down a path of self-destruction, God will disturb your peace. He says, I'm not going to let you be comfortable in your sinful behavior. Our Wednesday word today is Christ above the culture. We have got to understand that we cannot protect our peace at any cost, because sometimes it's God himself that's trying to break our peace up. Particularly when our peace involves us staying in a comfort zone, being satisfied when God is trying to move us forward. Particularly when it involves bad behavior, self-destructive behavior, God says no. And then thirdly and finally, when our peace is associated with toxic people. A lot of us have relationships, friendships, attachments that God doesn't want us to have. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says it best. Don't be misled by the culture. Bad company corrupts good character. In other words, you've got to be so very careful who you choose to spend your time with. Why? Because good or bad, they will influence your behavior. Good or bad, they will influence your decisions. Good or bad, they can influence the very direction of your life. And anytime you feel peace around toxic people, God will come in and disturb that peace. I know what we say. That's been my friend since childhood. That's a member of my family, and blood is thicker than water. They were there at a point in my life when I really needed someone. But the truth of the matter is this. Sometimes we outgrow people and relationships. Sometimes it can be the very fact that at this stage in your life, at this age, at this point in your life, that you're focused on your career and your family, while they're still focused on their social life and self-indulgence. Sometimes people outgrow one another. And it doesn't even mean that they're a bad person or they're bad people. But every now and then you find out that your lives are headed in totally different directions. Sometimes they're going right and you're going left, and you've got to make a decision in order to be everything God wants me to be. I've got to detach myself from this relationship. Even though for a season in my life, this relationship brought me peace. It brought me pleasure. I've got a lot of good memories. But where God is taking me, sometimes you have to detach. And dear hearts, that will disturb your peace. Our Wednesday word today is Christ above the culture. When it comes to your peace, just know that God always reserves the right to disturb it.